back to the daily grind, and shout out to the full-time patrons. Make sure to hit subscribe if you're new and hit thumbs up if you're not a baby back bagel biting bitch boy, cause you know what time it is. It's full time.
MMA.
And what is going on, full-time family? I know you're thinking, what in the is going on here? This is not the UFC full-time MMA predictions we are used to. No, it is not, and that is because the UFC's website has went through a massive transition. They're updating the whole website. Everything is different. If you've went to the UFC.com for the last, I don't know, 10 years or longer, it's really kind of been the same. I mean, I remember back in high school, I'm pretty sure it was similar to how it's been this whole time, and they just changed everything, guys. They changed everything. So if you go to UFC.com, you'll see everything is new. They don't lay out the fight cards anymore, even, and I don't like this, man. It really sucks for my breakdowns, honestly. They don't have the fight history right under the fighters anymore. Like, I'll just show you an example. If you were to look up Cynthia Calvillo, for one, I can't just click Cynthia Calvillo's name and go to look at her fight history. I mean, you got some stats right here, but that's not what I was really looking for. On the old UFC, it would have like Cynthia Calvillo and then like her last 10 fights right under her. And it would say, okay, she won this fight decision, won this fight knockout, and it had all of her UFC fights right there. And it even showed you, okay, she scored 3 takedowns in this fight. She scored 2 takedowns in this fight. She got taken down 4 times in this fight. And I really used that information a lot to make my predictions. It really lets you know if someone scored 5 takedowns on this guy and then 8 takedowns on this guy, that guy's probably got great wrestling. You know, and if this guy got taken down 3 times and that guy got taken down 5 times, might be not a great matchup. You know, and that's just the basic level of how you could use that information, and that just goes into a part of how I break down my fights. But now, unless you're going to watch like their last 10 fights in a row for every fight prediction, you can't really get good stats on, you know, who they were able to take down, how many times the strikes landed, how close was the fight. It's just way different, which we'll see if we can still be Mystic full-time. I think we can. I got a good, you know, I feel like even with this new format, I was able to break down this card and make some educated predictions using the sites like Tapology and SureDog, and just looking up some of these people's last fights when it was absolutely necessary, watching some of their fights if I didn't recall them. So there's that little quick information for you guys. Other quick nugget, you see the green check mark on your screen. This is going to be now how you see my predictions, because the UFC also on their new website no longer has the full fight card available for me to just take a screen cap of and write the X's on, right? Like the full fight card all the way from the main card to the prelims. They used to just have it posted on the main page. Now it's in this format, and so I know a lot of people might not listen to the entire breakdown. They just click it to see who I predicted, and they just looked at the X's and then they got out of the video. Well, that's no longer available, so I apologize for that until I figure out a way to just get those on the screen, because I know not everybody wants to hear my fucking rookie, and when I say rookie, I mean non-technical breakdown of these fights. I'm giving you the history of the fighters, who they've been fighting, why I'm making my prediction, but I'm not telling you about who's got the better fucking straight left hook and the better fucking right kick to the body and who's fighting in southpaw. That's not how my predictions and my breakdowns come about. So if that's what you're looking for, you might just be curious to see who I'm predicting, and now you kind of have to fast forward through the video and see where I placed the green check mark. So that's the difference for now, until I can find a fight card that I can just make X's on. Now, with all of that out the way, let's get into the UFC Buenos Aires Fight Night 140, headlined by Santiago Ponzinibbio versus Magny, breakdown and predictions. A lot of you guys, well, not a lot of you, but a few of you, if you are subscribed to our Patreon, you have seen that we just uploaded the prelim breakdown for all of these, including the UFC Fight Pass and Fox Sports breakdowns. We broke down the whole card. Those are located on Patreon, and you can see those for free. By the way, if you were wondering, you can go to patreon.com/fulltimemma for free and see the videos. The only difference is, if you decide to help support the channel, you can pay up and see the videos a few days early. But you can still go over there for absolutely free and see the videos. It's just a couple days later. So if you are interested in seeing who I broke down on the predictions, you can go over there. And also, betting advice and stuff like that I place over there if you're interested in the fake money series or anything like that for us broke people out there. That's over there as well. So now, salute to the family. Let's get straight into these breakdowns because we've done enough talking. The first fight of the night is going to be between Cynthia Calvillo and Poliana Botelho. This is going to be a interesting fight because it is, I feel like for me, I'm picking Cynthia Calvillo to win the fight, and I think she's got a good chance, but Poliana Botelho is dangerous. Poliana Botelho is a finisher, and her kick to the body is probably one of the most dangerous weapons you're going to see in this women's strawweight division, aside from like Tatiana Suarez's takedowns or any shot from Jessica Andrade, right? But man, she's got a kick to the body that puts girls down. So that's one thing I think Cynthia Calvillo needs to watch out for. But if she's able to do that, I believe Cynthia Calvillo wins this fight. Cynthia Calvillo has a very impressive resume with wins over Jillian Robertson, Montana De La Rosa, Amanda Bobby Cooper, Pearl Gonzalez, and Joanne Calderwood, and only 6 wins and 1 close decision loss to Carla Esparza after going 7-1 as an amateur, where she even had a win over Aspen Ladd. So very impressive resume for Cynthia Calvillo. Poliana Botelho is slightly younger and has 1 more pro fight than Cynthia Calvillo, and while she definitely hasn't been fighting the same level competition as Cynthia throughout her career, she's finished 6 of her 7 wins, and she only lost her second pro fight to Viviane Pereira, who's a smaller opponent similar to Cynthia Calvillo, which fares well for the Calvillo pick because Viviane Pereira is a smaller fighter, and Poliana Botelho is 5'8". I think Viviane Pereira might be closer to 5'1", 5'2"-ish. Like, she's pretty short for the division, and she had success against Poliana Botelho, and Calvillo will also be a little shorter in this fight. But we've seen a shorter fighter was actually the only person to beat Poliana. So if Cynthia Calvillo can avoid getting that nasty body kick and potentially getting finished or even losing the robbery decision, hell, I think Cynthia Calvillo will get her hand raised in that fight, and that's going to be my prediction for the first fight of the night. Now, if you listened on Patreon to the prelim breakdown, you know I'm going to have to move this green check mark back down to the center before I move to the next card, or the next fight, so it's not as confusing, because you'll see, if I didn't, the check mark would have automatically been over Guido Canetti's head, and I don't want to confuse you and make you believe that's who I'm picking, even though that might be who I'm picking in this fight, but I'm just saying, just as an example. So that's why I moved it back down then. So with that being said, the next fight is between Argentina's own Guido Canetti and Marlon Vera. In this fight, I believe I'm actually going to be giving the edge to Marlon Vera to get the W. Guido Canetti also trains with Team Alpha Male, and he's fighting out of Buenos Aires, Argentina, so he'll for sure have the home crowd on his side in this matchup with Marlon Vera, who's the younger, more experienced fighter coming into this bout. These guys actually have a little bit of a history coming into the fight, and in Canetti's most recent fight, he actually beat Marlon Vera's teammate. And, oh, phone's ringing, my bad, guys. 1 second, pause that. So in his most recent fight, he actually beat Marlon Vera's teammate, and it was in Chile. So that actually makes this fight a little more sweet for Marlon Vera, because his teammate Diego Rivas was fighting in Chile, and Guido Canetti upset him there and beat him. Also, these guys, I believe, were teammates on The Ultimate Fighter, so there's a little bit of history with these guys. But yeah, I'm giving the edge to Marlon Vera. He's the younger, more experienced fighter who's been more active and fighting higher level competition. Vera's 4-2 in his last 6 fights, and he only lost to John Lineker and Douglas Andrade, who have great resumes, and they're very impressive fighters. John Lineker, we know, has been a staple in the top ranks of the bantamweight division for a while, so tough fight for Vera there. But Marlon Chito Vera's actually fought a lot of tough guys throughout his career, and I think he should be able to get the win here. So I'm giving the edge to Marlon Vera. Moving on to the next fight of the night, which the UFC's website, you can see. Oh, let me see, that's what happens if I don't move the check mark. But Tom Breeze isn't in this fight anymore, so you can, you know, I'm not picking him to win because he's actually not even in this fight. If we go over actually to Tapology, which I will for you right here, you will see we have a replacement opponent in this fight for Cesar Ferreira. He's still on the card, but He's going to be taking on Ian Heinisch now. So with that being said, that's not on the UFC's website officially yet, but actually I wish it was, because I could be taking Ian Heinisch to win this fight, you guys. It's hard for me to break down, so let me move this check mark out the way, but I'll break it down for you guys. This is the fight we're talking about, Ian Heinisch versus Cesar Ferreira. Let's see if we can just get this fight on the, there we go, boom. So yeah, we'll just use this one for now. So with that being said, Ian Heinisch is taking this fight on short notice, but he's actually a very talented fighter. He's replacing Tom Breeze and making his UFC debut, riding a 3-fight winning streak over some actually pretty decent competition in the LFA, and then most recently winning on Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series about 3.5 months ago. This will be his 4th fight this year. Cesar Ferreira is training with the Black Zillions, and he's 5-1 in his last 6 fights, only losing to Elias Theodorou, and currently riding a 2-fight winning streak with a split decision win over Nate Marquardt and a first-round triangle choke win over Karl Roberson back in May. This is actually a tough fight for me to call because Ferreira didn't look great in the split decision win over Nate Marquardt, but his submission over Karl Roberson was super slick, and he also has an impressive wins over Jack Hermanson and Anthony Smith in his last 5 fights. All that being said, Ian Heinisch is a pretty tough customer, making his UFC debut, having finished 5 of his last 6 wins, and his only professional loss came to Maluco Perez. Heinisch actually fought some pretty tough guys in the LFA and started fighting a little late in 2014, but he went 3-0 as an amateur in 2014, and since 2015 he's got already an 11-1 MMA record, and he made it to the UFC in just these 3 years as a fighter, beating some pretty tough guys in the process. Now he's never fought a fighter with as much UFC experience as Cesar Ferreira, but I'm actually gonna give him the edge in this fight. I'm gonna give the edge to the underdog Kurt Heinisch to win this fight. He's a great wrestler, been fighting tough guys, he's been super active, and I believe he has more paths to victory in this fight. He can either grind out a win with his wrestling over Cesar Ferreira, or knock out or submit Ferreira, who does have more UFC experience, but he hasn't been fighting guys with great wrestling, and I think that'll be the key if Heinisch wants to pull off this upset on short notice. Use his wrestling, avoid being submitted, and he'll win this fight and make a very impressive UFC debut. And I think that's very possible for Ian Heinisch, and that's who I'm giving the edge in this fight. Now, let's get back to UFC.com, and yeah, so the check mark would be over here if it was Ian Heinisch, but he's not there. Either way, it's not going to Cesar Ferreira in my predictions for the night. Let's move on to the next fight of the card. 3 fights left to break down for UFC Buenos Aires, UFC Fight Night 140. We got Khalil Roundtree Jr. taking on Johnny Walker. Yo, Johnny Walker is actually pretty impressive. But I do think I'm going to be giving the edge to Khalil Roundtree Jr. in this fight. But yo, I'm looking forward to it, I'll tell you that much, because Johnny Walker is a youngin', man. He's 6'5", light heavyweight, a young guy with a lot of potential, but this is going to be a tough fight. I'll break it down. Let's see. Johnny Walker is currently riding a 6-fight winning streak, and he's finished 5 of those 6 fights. He is coming off of a unanimous decision win over Luis Henrique da Silva on Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series. Khalil Roundtree Jr. is coming into this fight riding a 3-fight winning streak, and most recently a very impressive knockout win over the kickboxing legend Gokhan Saki. I'm giving the edge to Roundtree in this fight, but it's going to be a tough task against the 6'5", 26-year-old Johnny Walker, who's finished, like I said, all of his fights outside of Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series, and this will be Johnny Walker's 5th fight this year. He can definitely finish Roundtree as well, so I'm not counting him out of this fight at all, but I'm going to pick Roundtree to beat the younger, more experienced Johnny Walker, because Roundtree's been fighting some pretty tough competition throughout his career, only losing via submission to Tyson Pedro and getting held down by a wrestler in the fight before that. Johnny Walker's dangerous, but none of the guys he's finished are on the level of Khalil Roundtree Jr. or the competition Khalil has been fighting, so I'll definitely give the edge to Khalil Roundtree Jr., but I'm looking forward to the fight for sure. Now let's move to the co-main event of the evening. Ricardo Lamas, the bully, taking on the damaged Darren Elkins. Ooh, this is a tough fight for me to pick, you guys, because you can never count Darren Elkins out. But I got to give the edge to Ricardo Lamas in the co-main event, you guys. I believe Ricardo Lamas he's definitely the more talented fighter. He's on a 2-fight losing streak currently, and Darren Elkins was recently just riding a 6-fight winning streak, but it was snapped. But if you know the story of Darren the Damage Elkins, you know he's pretty much like the Derek Lewis of the featherweight division. He'll take damage and be down in fights, and if it goes to a decision, he would for sure probably lose on the judges' scorecards, probably pretty dominantly in some of those. But he gets the finish in the 3rd round, or does enough to pull off the split decision, or whatever he needs to do to get the win. So he was riding a 6-fight winning streak before his last fight, where he lost to Alexander Volkanovski. In that last fight, it was a unanimous decision. Volkanovski got, he wasn't able to get the finish in the 3rd round like you might have been hoping for if you were rooting for Darren Elkins and you know what he has the potential to do. But in the fights before that, he had wins over Michael Johnson, Dennis Bermudez, Mirsad Bektic, Godfredo Pepe, and Chaz Skelly. Very impressive wins for Darren Elkins there. So Ricardo Lamas, though, he was ranked in the top 5 of the featherweight division. He was a top 5 featherweight in the world before losing a 1st-round knockout to Team Alpha Male's Josh Emmett, who's actually Elkins' teammate. Josh Emmett stepped in for Jose Aldo on short notice, and then he knocked out Ricardo Lamas, shocked the world a little bit that night. And then most recently, Ricardo Lamas lost a split decision to Mirsad Bektic, and it was probably more like a unanimous decision loss, but one of the judges scored it for Ricardo Lamas, which was a little surprising because I definitely had a unanimous decision for Bektic, but it is what it is. And it says, and that fight was most recently, that was at UFC 225, in front of his home crowd for Ricardo Lamas, who's from Chicago, lost a split decision in front of his home crowd. Maybe that's why it was a split, because it was actually a unanimous. So, with that being said, yeah, man, I'm giving the edge to Lamas, although you can never count Darren Elkins out of a fight. I'm going to give it to Lamas. Not super confident in the pick because Darren Elkins is known for taking a lot of damage then coming back. Like I said, this guy's like a featherweight Derek Lewis. Ricardo Lamas' last 3 fights, in hindsight, honestly, weren't super impressive. He knocked out Jason Knight, who took the fight on short notice, but Jason Knight's now riding a 4-fight losing streak, and then the last 2 fights were losses, of course. Darren Elkins is also the younger, more experienced fighter here, and if you look at his resume, it's kind of hard to believe all the good featherweights he's actually got wins over, which is why I want to pick Darren Elkins to win this fight. It's very possible, but I'm going to give the edge to Lamas unless he gets knocked out or submitted in this fight, or maybe even loses a split decision. But I got Lamas. I'll give the edge to Lamas. Now, let's move to the main event of the evening. Santiago Ponzinibbio versus Neil Magny. It is going down, full-time family at UFC Argentina. Going to be a good fight. Santiago Ponzinibbio is currently riding a 6-fight winning streak in the UFC, coming off of a unanimous decision win over Mike Perry a little under a year ago. But he was scheduled to face Kamaru Usman in the main event of UFC Chile until he was forced out due to an injury. Neil Magny's 3-1 in his last 4 fights, currently riding a 2-fight winning streak over Carlos Condit and Craig White back at UFC Liverpool, who replaced Gunnar Nelson on short notice. Neil Magny is dangerous and has more UFC experience than Santiago Ponzinibbio, but I'm going to give the edge to Ponzinibbio to win this fight. I think it's really close. It's a really close call for me because Neil Magny is definitely underrated in my opinion. He's fighting his 20th UFC fight, not his 20th pro fight. He's fighting his 20th fight in the UFC. And some of the guys he's been able to beat, such as Uzan Umalatov, Tim Mean, Alex Garcia, Hyung Yu Lim, Eric Silva, Kelvin Gastelum, Johnny Hendricks, Carlos Condit, just all super impressive. But I'm going to give the edge to Santiago Ponzinibbio. I think he's a little better than the guys Magny has beat in his last 5 fights. And he's also headlining in front of his home country in Argentina. Definitely a lot more to fight for as far as that is concerned. You know, UFC debuting in Argentina, I believe. Santiago Ponzinibbio, the main event, man. So this fight's close to a toss-up, and for that reason probably is why I'm just going to give the edge to Ponzinibbio. But I will not be surprised if Magny comes in here and pulls off the upset, because like I said, his resume is extremely impressive. He's fighting his 20th fight in the UFC, and I feel like Magny is definitely underrated and also not one you should count out. So I'll give the edge to Ponzinibbio. Not super confident, but that's my predictions, full-time family. Wish we could go over a quick, like, you could just see them all on the screen, but I'll figure that out for the next video for sure. I'll try and figure out how we can have all the predictions on the screen at the same time. But if you just want a quick recap, I'll do my best. We got Ponzinibbio in the main event. We got Ricardo Lamas in the co-main. We're taking Khalil Roundtree Jr. to beat Johnny Walker. We're taking Cesar Ferreira. No, we're not. We're taking Ian Heinisch, who's taking this fight on short notice, to defeat Cesar Ferreira. And then we are taking Marlon Chito Vera to defeat Guido Canetti. And the first fight of the main card, we are taking Cynthia Calvillo to defeat Poliana Patello. Those are my predictions, full-time family. That being said, UFC Argentina goes down this Saturday. Now I got to break down Bellator, because I just realized there's Bellator this Friday. Holy smokes, it might be a double header. I got work to do, so we might not do a live show today, full-time family, unless we do it later tonight, because I got a lot of fights to break down and a lot of fights to predict, and with work this week and shit like that, I don't know if we'll have time for a live show today, but we'll try and get one in. Here's the UFC Argentina breakdown and predictions, and stay tuned for the Bellator breakdown and predictions coming up for this Friday. A lot of fights this weekend. Great time to be an MMA fan. Let the full-time family know what you think in the comments.
Bye, Felicia.